What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today we are here with the next episode of Get Ready With Me. Today we are doing the second half of A Court of Mist and Fury. If you are new around here and you have no idea what I'm talking about, this is like a book club that we do here on this channel. We pick a book series or just an individual book, we read up to a certain point, and we discuss it here on this channel while I do my makeup. And I usually try to use like some sort of like a new exciting product to, just sweeten the pot a little bit, add to the flavor. If you want to catch up with this series, if you haven't seen the previous videos, if you're not caught up on the books and you just want to kind of listen to the story and watch me do my makeup, I will link all of the videos that you have missed in the description down below, as well as the information of where you can find the books, stuff like that. The palette that I'm going to be using today is the new-ish Unleashed palette from Tarte Cosmetics. I picked this up at Ulta this morning because I was just there poking around seeing if there was anything new and exciting. And to be honest with you, the palette market has been a little bit dry the last couple of weeks, and this was the most exciting thing that I saw. It was either this or the new Morphe palette, and both of them kind of had a similar color scheme. Before we get into it, if you're just looking for a review on this palette, I'm not going to do a full review in this video because I only did one look, but my first impression is that this is a lovely palette as far as the formula is concerned, but like, I don't know, I'm starting to find this color layout a little bit boring. Like, we all have the turquoises and the warms together at this point. So I don't think it's the most exciting palette in the world, but it performed really well. So I'm going to be using that today to create this look while we talk about this book. Looks and Books would have been another good name for this series. Too late now. Before we get into it, I'm not 100% certain if we should continue with this series right now, or if we should take a little break from this series and start something new and then circle back to this series in a couple of months just to keep things fresh. I wanted to ask you guys what you think first, so I'm gonna leave a poll in the community tab here on YouTube, as well as on my Instagram story. I'll probably like run it twice just so you guys have a chance to vote in it. And I'll also try to link whatever poll I can in the comments down below so that you guys can find it easily there. But I just wanted your input because I don't want this to get stale going through the same story for so long, but I do want to finish out this series. So I was thinking that maybe we could take a break and go into something else, maybe read one book and then come back to this, or like two different books and then come back to this. Just tell me what you think. I just want to know what you think because I want to make sure that the content is fresh and poppin' for you. Please don't forget to leave a like on this video if you don't mind taking a second to do that, because it really helps me out and I always appreciate that. And also, if you are new around here, please go ahead and subscribe because I would love to have you around for more videos. I usually have some really clever reason why I say clever, but it's usually not clever. It's usually just really dumb. I usually have a really dumb reason why you should subscribe. But today I have a lot of thoughts because I've been talking for the last 3 hours and this is going to be a really long video anyway. So you should just subscribe because I think it would be a good time for all of us. I will not be talking directly about the products that I'm using, but I will list them all in the description down below, and there will be a title card here on the screen to let you know what I'm using as I'm using it. I think that is all we need to talk about before we get started. So let's just start prepping my skin and get into chapter 34 where we left off in the last video. So where we last left off, Feyre, Amren, and Rhys were in the summer court trying to schmooze over the High Lord of Summer, Tarquin. The goal of their visit is to actually steal the Book of Breathings while they're there, but Tarquin doesn't know that. He just thinks they're there to like make friends and like parlay and shit. And Feyre had been mighty upset because at the party on Tarquin's pleasure barge, she noticed that Rhys was flirting with one of Tarquin's cousins, Cressida, and she's pretty sure that he left with her and brought her back to his room for the night, and she's not having it, my friend. Not happy about it. She's afraid to go to breakfast the next morning because she doesn't think she can look him in the face because she's like that upset that he like went off and slept with another lady. So she spends the morning hanging out in the bathtub and she's practicing using her powers, and she's using her powers to create like little water animals with Tarquin's powers, because since Tarquin is closer to her, she can like summon his powers that are inside of her a little bit more easily. And then that day, Tarquin is going to take her on a tour of the city, and she sees Rhys when they're about to leave and she doesn't say shit to him, and then she's like all flirty and smiles at Tarquin, and she's like Tarquin takes her to one of the summer court's many treasure troves. When she gets there, she feels no sign of the Book of Breathings, but they do have some interesting conversations going on while she's there. Tarquin is really flirting with Feyre hard body karate. He even gives her a black diamond necklace that she was admiring in the treasure trove. As they're talking, it kind of becomes clear to Feyre that, unfortunately, even though she's about to ruin their entire relationship with Tarquin, he seems to be one of the only people, one of the only High Lords for sure, who sees Rhys for what he actually is. Like, he sees that he's actually a nice guy. They also connect over the fact that Tarquin thinks that they need to like reorder the way fairy society works and make the playing field more even between high fae and lesser fairies. Later that afternoon, she goes back to her room and Rhysand is waiting for her there, like just laying on her bed. Like, he owns the place, confronts him about the Cressida thing, and he's like, no, I didn't sleep with her. Is that why you ignored me this morning? And she's basically like, yeah. And then he's super jealous of the way she acted to Tarquin, especially the fact that she smiled at him and that she said that it would be very easy to fall in love with a man like him, because Rhys feels like he's the opposite of that. First of all, she never smiles at him, which is weird because she likes him, obviously. But he's more jealous of the fact that she says that Tarquin would be easy to fall in love with, because he doesn't feel like anybody would find it easy to fall in love with him, which is interesting because he's obviously very charming and he's obviously really good looking. But in his eyes, any woman that would want to be with him would be confronted with the fact that he's the High Lord of the Night Court and everybody hates him and like wants to kill him all the time. And I could definitely see how that would be a hindrance to dating, you know? So with all of that drama out of the way, Rhys and Feyre basically talk it out. They have a little cocktail, they make a little toast to the people who look at the stars and wish, and everything seems like it's back on the righted path again with them. She looks out across the water one day and she sees like this old broken down ass temple, and she's like, ooh, I feel like it's in there. Like, I just have like a suspicion, you know what I mean? She asks Tarquin about the temple and he's like really evasive about it, which makes her think even more that that's where they keep the book. She gets him to agree to take her on a little trip down there without arousing any suspicions. So they go on their little tour, they have a really nice day. She hates lying to him, but she knows that it's for the best because they need to defeat the King of Hybern, and then it is time to go to this temple and freaking put her money where her mouth is, man. She's gotta steal this book. So her and Amren go into the temple, and Rhys stays outside to keep an eye out for guards. When they get in there, it is basically like just a wreck of seaweed and mush and goop from the ocean floor, and it's just generally really nasty. There's like disgusting water up to their chests and it smells nasty, and Amren is gagging. Feyre uses her shape-shifting powers to like turn herself into Tarquin in order to get the doors to unlock. She like basically tricks the magic of the doors to unlock them. And after doing that for 2 sets of doors, the second one she doesn't actually shape-shift, she just like tricks it with her power. They get into this little room where the book is stored, and it's in a lead box to contain its power, and it's whispering creepy shit to her. But when she goes to grab it, it knows that she's not him, and it says that she's a liar, and it slams the door shut. So Amren has to like bust open the door with her power, and it's like a whole shit show. They managed to like part the water using like the combination of both of their power and get back to the staircase. But once they got to the staircase, it filled up with water, and then like there was a door at the top that locked them down, and they were like literally just moments away from drowning. But in the final moments, when it was just about to be too late for the both of them, somebody busts through the door, and guess who it is? It's the water wraiths that Feyre saved when she gave them her jewelry against Tannablin's better wishes. They drag them out of there super fast. Apparently these things swim like the fastest. And they drag them out up above the surface where they can get some air. They let them throw up all the water that they swallowed and stuff. And then Amren and Feyre have to swim to shore, and they got the book. They almost died, but they got the damn thing. And just like they were wondering, you may be wondering, where the hell was Rhysand during all of this? Why didn't he come save them when they were basically almost dead? He was upstairs trying to fight off all of Tarquin's guards, which turns out that he missed quite a few of them, and they went back and told Tarquin that somebody was stealing their book, and they had to hightail it out of there. So they went back to Valaris, and when they got back to Valaris a couple hours later, she goes upstairs and she finds Rhysand kind of brooding, looking out over the city, and she's like, why the hell are you so upset? And essentially he says that he's upset not just because that he feels bad because he thinks that he could genuinely be friends and allies with Tarquin, but also because once they got back, they received a box from the Summer Court, and inside the box box, there were 3 blood rubies, which are a traditional sign that the summer court gives out when there is a price on your head. So basically, the summer court has a hit out on Feyre, Rhys, and Amren. So the Book of Breathings itself is actually not even like a book in the sense that it's made of paper. It's like metal slabs with words carved into it. It's a language from the world that Amren comes from, which we don't really know much about what that is, but it's definitely not Earth, or at least whatever version of Earth we live in this book. So Amren is the only one who can even like come close to cracking the code. So she takes the book to try to start to relearn the language so they can decode what it says inside. So Feyre is trying to distract Rhys from him being all broody over the Tarquin and the blood ruby situation. So she jokes that she's gonna go to the little shop across the street and get some lacy underwear to try to make Tarquin not be mad at her anymore. And then out of nowhere, Asriel comes and lands, so she like gets out of there because she wants them like to have time to talk about everything that went on. And when she leaves, she's like thinking about going to this shop with Rhys, and she has like this whole fantasy about going in there and like trying these clothes on for him and kicking out the ladies who work there. And a few minutes into like this deep fantasy in her mind, she realizes that it's not even coming from her own brain, that Rhys broke into her mind and planted it there. And when she realizes it, he starts laughing on the other end of their bond, which she's super mad about, but she's also happy that she cheered him up. So that night after Feyre goes to bed, she's laying there and she feels like Rhysand's power creeping through the House of Wind, and she feels like there's like a panic to it. So she follows it to his room, and she stumbles into his room in the dark, and he's like completely out of it on the bed, not responding to anything, and she has to like slap him to wake him up. So she finally wakes him up, and he's gonna like strangle her because he's like in the throes of panic, and she wakes him from his nightmare and like helps him get past it. But he's butt-ass naked in this bed. She said that she didn't really like glimpse the goods, which is like how, you know what I mean? But she also talks a lot about like these tattoos that he has on his knees. Apparently on each knee he has 3 mountains with 3 stars tattooed on them. But I really don't understand how she didn't see his pee-pee if she's sitting there, you know? She said she saw it, but she didn't really see it, which, what does that even mean? You saw it. You saw what you saw. Amren is like holed up in her apartment trying to decode this book. So Feyre goes and brings her a container of blood, because that's what Amren eats. And Rhys has to leave a few times to take care of business in other parts of the court, and she's like really missing him when he's gone. But whenever he's gone, they keep in touch by talking on a piece of paper, the way that he did the first time when she was in the woods and he used her as bait to trap the adder. And eventually they hear back from the human queens. They've been waiting to hear from them since they went to visit Feyre's sisters and sent that note, and they finally hear back. So it's time to go back to the human realm and talk to these queens about what's about to go down with King Hybern. I always feel like it's weird the way it's written in the book, because sometimes they just call him Hybern, like his name is Hybern, but the place is Hybern and he's the king of Hybern, and we don't actually know his name. But sometimes they just call him Hybern. So there are 6 human queens in total, but only 5 show up, and they say that one of the human queens is unwell and she couldn't make it. Apparently the human queens can winnow, which none of them knew, and they ask why or how they can winnow, and the human queens say that it's their secret and was a gift from fairy kind to them. So Rhysand tells them about the war and the Hybern situation, and basically just flat out pleads his case that they should work together to try to save as many people, both human and fairy, as possible. They say that they know and they've been preparing, but there are no signs of preparation in the territory where Feyre's sisters live, and they say that's because they have no intention of defending that territory because it's too small, which is really cold and like shitty leadership, really, if you think about it. Nesta is like pissed, and she just straight up calls them cowards and is very Nesta-like to them. Feyre basically just straight up begs them to give her the book because she's desperate at this point. But they don't trust that Rhys is the good person that he says he is, and not just like an evil lord of the night court who's gonna basically fuck them over as soon as they turn their back. So they want proof So the queens leave and say that they'll come back basically when they feel like it, but after Rhys has proof for them about why they should believe him that he's like working for the greater good of both fairies and humans. So the plan is that Rhys will show them Valaris, which is a huge risk and a very big price for him to pay because Valaris has been a secret for such a long time. He's not exactly trusting enough to show them by bringing them there. So they plan to show them using this object that Mor's father owns called the Veritas, which is an orb that basically shows the truths of the world. So if you ask the Veritas to show you something, it can only show you like the truest version of that something. But Mor's dad is kind of a huge dick. So they're not going to be able to just get it from him. They have to steal it from him. So they fly to the night court and Feyre flies there with Rhys. And on the way there, they're all flirty, talky. And while they're flying, they get attacked by ash arrows within their own territory, which is definitely not good. You don't want that. Before the meeting at the Court of Nightmares, they spend some time in the woods trying to track where these ash arrows came from. They really don't find much and they have to give up looking because they need to go to this meeting. So they show up at the Court of Nightmares and Feyre gets there with Mor first and she's wearing that scandalous dress again, the one that she was wearing under the mountain, except this time it's glittering black. And I gotta tell you, this dress sounds like straight fire. It sounds so cool. The plan is that Rhys and Feyre are going to act as a distraction while Mor and Azriel go off and steal the Veritas from her dad. So they walk in and they're in this big throne room and Rhys sits down on the throne and puts Feyre in his lap. And then he calls over Keir, who is Mor's dad, and asks him for an update on what's been going on at the Court of Nightmares when he hasn't been around. And essentially, this entire chapter is just Rhys and Feyre on this throne, like touching and grinding on each other to distract Keir, which they both obviously were into it. Like it was so painfully obvious that they were both into it this whole time, and both of them were acting like they were just acting, and it was like, come on guys, come on now. But they put on quite a show for everyone, and Keir is indeed thoroughly distracted. Azriel and Mor get back and can like kind of nod to them and confirm that they have the Veritas. Feyre takes off and she walks away from Rhys, and as she walks away, Keir calls her a whore under his breath, and Rhys hears him and he uses his magic to break apart Keir's bones into tiny little pieces, just into smithereens. So now that they've got the Veritas, they can just leave the Court of Nightmares. They don't need to stick around there. So they leave to go home right away. But on the way back, instead of winnowing right back to Valaris, Rhys stops in like an empty field where it's nice and quiet because he wants to talk to Feyre about everything that they did that night. So she's upset at first because she feels like it felt real to her what they were doing, and she thinks that maybe he doesn't feel the same way. She also tells him that she doesn't want him to protect her the way that Tamlin did, and he gets upset and says, stop comparing me to Tamlin, which fair enough, nobody wants to be compared to Tamlin. She calls him out for basically faking things in front of his friends and acting like things don't bother him when they clearly really do. He asks her what she wants, like meaning like basically what the hell do you want in life? And she's like, you know, I gotta be honest with you, I don't know. But what she said to him hit really close to home, and he seems like really sort of hurt by it, and he flies them home and she waits for him to come talk in the garden for like a couple of hours, and he never comes. So essentially Rhys ghosts her for like a bunch of days. Amryn kind of lets it slip that Rhys is going to be back within a couple of days though, because there's a holiday coming up called Starfall, and it's like a big deal in the Night Court, and it's the first one that they'll be celebrating for 50 years. So she'll be seeing him soon one way or another. So the night of Starfall comes and she still hasn't heard from Rhys at all. She's got like this beautiful dress that looks like fallen stars. She gets to wear the best dresses. Turns out later on we find out that Rhys picks all these dresses himself, and he's just like super fashion man, by the way. Also really good at home decor. Can we stand him any harder? At first, when she gets to the party, Reese isn't there yet. She winds up flying there with Cassian, and she's kind of disappointed. Like, she's really nervous to see him because she hasn't seen him since they had their little spat. She finds Moore and she asks her, like, what the hell is this party about? And Moore's like, it's better if you just see it for yourself when it starts. And she's like, what do you mean starts? Like, we're at the party. And Moore's like, oh, no, there's more. Like, this isn't even the good part. And as she's having this conversation with Moore, Rhys-Ann sneaks up behind them and starts a conversation. He tells Farrah that he wasn't trying to punish her by not answering her. He just needed time to process everything that they said. And essentially, the reason that he needed so much time to process is because he knows that in a lot of ways that she was kind of right. So Starfall begins, and basically what Starfall is like a big party that happens while shooting stars fall closer than you could ever think imaginable, like within like a touching distance, and everybody watches it and dances. So everybody's watching the stars come down and they're dancing joyously. He brings her to a balcony, just the two of them, where they can get a better view, and he explains that they're not actually stars, but they're like spirits that pass through, and nobody knows where they're going or what they are or why it happens every year. So Farrah and Reese have a moment. She's touching his hand, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, one of the shooting stars smacks her in the face and covers her in like star goo. And they have a good laugh about it, and she winds up drawing a little drawing on Reese's hand with the dusty goo stuff that came off of the star. And one big thing that happens in this scene is she finally smiles at Reese. After all of this time, all of the things that he's done to help her, all of the affection that she's grown for him, she's literally never smiled at him once. And he's like completely enthralled with her. So Farrah convinces him to go dance with their friends and just celebrate the rest of the holiday. So they go down into the balcony and they dance the night away, like literally dance the entire night together with Moore and Cassian and Azriel, and have a wonderful, wonderful time. So the next day they leave and go to the Illyrian war camps to hide where they are from their enemies. It's basically the safest place that they can think of. The Illyrian war camps are where Reese and Cassian and Azriel basically grew up. They trained there their whole lives. And to pass the time while they're there, he takes Farrah out and has her practice her magic like way out in the woods and in the fields away from everyone. Farrah is feeling very, very guilty because she feels like a traitor. She feels like it's only been a couple of months since she was with Tamlin and she's already falling for Reese, and how could she do this, and she's a piece of filth and a piece of trash, and all of these awful things that she keeps saying about herself. Even though she definitely kind of hated Tamlin by the time she left, she still feels really guilty about it. When Farrah was with Tamlin, he had told her that his family had been killed by another High Lord. Turns out that it was actually Reese and Reese's dad. So before Reese became High Lord, when his dad was still High Lord, Tamlin's dad was really threatened by how powerful Reese was, so he tried to have Rhys-Ann killed by going to his house and like killing him and his mother and his sister, but Reese wasn't there. He was out somewhere else working with his dad, and they wound up just slaughtering Reese's mom and sister. So in retaliation and in anger and in rage, Reese and his dad went to the Spring Court and tried to kill Tamlin's dad for having that done. Reese's dad promised that he wouldn't kill Tamlin's mom and sister because they didn't do things like that. But when they got there, he did it anyway. And he also promised that he wouldn't kill Tamlin, that he would just kill the dad. But he was marching toward Tamlin's room to go kill him when Reese tried to stop him. And in that time, Tamlin came out of the room and wound up killing Reese's father in one blow. So now Tamlin's dad was killed, and then Reese's dad was killed. And they wound up both becoming High Lord of their respective courts in the same moment because they killed off each other's families. And then they just like ran away from each other and never spoke of it again. Like they were just enemies from that point out. And Farrah is like fucking mind blown because she had no idea how deep the history between Reese and Tamlin went. She just thought they were like arbitrary enemies. The next day they go out and they're practicing again. This time they go far enough out into the wilderness that they have to spend the night. Reese tells her that there is like a Wayfarer's Inn nearby, so they'll have somewhere to stay. They won't need to camp or anything like that. They're trekking through like a big open field, and Farrah gets pretty far out ahead of Reese, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, who shows up but 4 of Tamlin's guards and freaking Lucian. So Lucian seems to be really under the impression that Farah is still being held against her will, and he tries to take her back with him and convince her to come, but she's not having it, obviously, because she doesn't want to go back. And she wrote them that letter, but they think that she's writing the letter because Rhys is making them, which obviously they were going to think that. I don't know why she thought that letter was going to be very helpful at all. She knows that if he grabs her, that he's just going to winnow her away, so she's got to like move really quick. So she like, I don't know, she breaks out all of her powers. She must have been practicing really hard, because she like winnows away from him, and then she shape shifts into like an Illyrian warrior. She's got like big wings on the back of her and shit. Like all of a sudden she can do all this stuff, I guess because again, it seems like most of her powers come out when there's like high emotion or like pressure involved. Rhys gets there just in the nick of time, and he winds up using a little bit of his power to cover up his wings. And at this point he hadn't been using power for a while, because the King of Highburn and his soldiers are supposedly the ones that tried to shoot them down when they were on their way to the Night Court. And the reason they think that they knew where they were is because they're tracking Rhys by his use of his power. He's like super impressed with how Farah handled the whole situation, and essentially she just sends Lucian on his merry way, and he's all like, we're gonna get her back, you'll pay for this, Rhysand, which no, he won't. The Spring Court is all freaking talk, man. If there's one thing that we've learned in this book, is that they don't know how to put their money where their damn mouth is, you know what I mean? But what we learned from this encounter is that Tamlin still thinks that she's being held against her will, and is willing to do a whole hell of a lot to try to get her back. So they get to this Wayfarer's Inn for the night, and it is packed. There's only one tiny room left, and it's like one bed upstairs, like squished in the attic. Now, Fair is all like, one bed? Now I'm gonna have to sleep next to this man that I'm clearly in love with. What a fucking nightmare. But we all know she's kidding herself, okay? So Rhys goes to get them some food, and they play a thought for a thought again. And Rhys tells her that he feels like he's dying when he looks at her. And she admits that she has not been able to stop thinking about him for a long time. So they go to bed, and it's really cold in there, and there is no fire in their room. So Rhys kind of like comes up behind her and big spoons her, and he says, no expectations, just body heat. But come on, we all know what's about to happen. Essentially, the next entire chapter is a description of Rhys pleasuring her manually, if you will. It's very explicit, and let me tell you something, Rhys is into some freaky shit. But before they kind of get into it, Rhys asks her again what she wants, and she says that she wants a distraction and she wants fun, which that's not what he wanted to hear, but it also doesn't stop him from doing what he's gonna do. So they leave this stinky little shitty inn, and they fly off for the day to go work on her powers somewhere else. And he turns to her while they're flying and says something along the lines of, I have one more thing and one more story that I need to tell you. And as he's about to tell her, a bunch of ash arrows rain out of the sky and shoot him through the wings, and they go falling into the forest and tumbling to their doom. I guess not to their doom, but they're fucked up, like they're in a bad situation. As they're falling, he tries to winnow them out of there, but he can't do it because there's poison on the arrows that they put through him. So not only are they ash, which is really bad for fairies, but there's poison on them too. So they crash into the woods, and Rhys like throws her away from him to get her out of harm's way, and she can't find him. So she like winnows around in the dark, which now all of a sudden like her powers are really starting to be popping because she can do all this stuff on her own. And she shape shifts her eyes so that they're like cat eyes so that she could see at night. And she winds up tracking him down to a cave where all of these soldiers, like creatures that are like the adder, dragged him off, and they're whipping him in this cave. Feyre goes like full on assassin mode, and she slits all the throats of the people who had him captive and gets him free. And she can winnow now, but she can't do it like long distances. She can only go like a couple of miles at a time. So she basically gets them to a little cave that she knows of that's a safe spot. She pulls all of the arrows out of his wings, and while she's pulling the arrows out of his wings, she tells him stories of her sisters and like how Elaine bought her the paints and how she painted the house. At this point, she puts two and two together and realizes that it was Highburn soldiers who did this to them, and that they tracked them using that little bit of magic that he used to cover up his wings when they ran into Lucian the day before. And while Feyre is pulling all of these arrows out of Rhys's wings, she also tells him that she thinks that she's been looking for him and his friends in a way for a long time. She realizes that she never really fit in the other places that she lived, even when she was with Tamlin, and that this is the first time that she really feels like she fits in with the family. And he says that he's been looking for her for a long time too. And then they basically sleep the rest of the night out in the cave, trying to give Rhys time to heal so they can get out of there. However, when they wake up in the morning, he is still not well. The poison is still in his veins. He still can't use his magic. So she's like, all right, I'm gonna have to take matters into my own hands and do something about this. So she goes out into the woods and she plans to snare the Suriel. He can tell her what she needs to do to get Rhys well again. So long story short, she goes out into the woods, she snags the Suriel, and he does tell her what she needs to do. And essentially all she needs to do is give Rhys mouthfuls of her blood, because her blood has like healing properties in it. And also there are these plants, like little weeds by the river that she can get and he can chew on that'll make him feel better as well. The Suriel drops the information that Rhys is her mate. When two fairies are mates, apparently it means like this deep, unbreakable bond. So she gets the flowers, she goes back to the cave, she gives him the mouthfuls of blood, but she's like so mean to him while she does it at this point, and he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. She tells him that she found out, and he's like, I couldn't tell you because you would have thought that I was like bullshitting you and like trying to get you away from Tamlin, and I didn't want you to hate me, and I wanted you to find out in your own time. And she's just not having it. So as soon as he's feeling better, which is like fairly quick, apparently her blood healing properties are very, very potent, she makes him winnow them back to the war camp. And as soon as they get there, she like dumps him on the ground, storms off, and tells Moore that she wants her to bring her somewhere far away that she could be alone. Moore brings her to this family cabin up in the mountains. Before Moore leaves her there, she tries to kind of tell her like, hey, you know, you shouldn't be mad at him. He was trying to do the right thing. And Feyre's like, I don't care. Moore also says that mate or not, that ever since Feyre's been around, it's the happiest she's ever seen Rhys. And Feyre also says, I don't care to that, which yes, you do. You definitely care. Who are you kidding? You care. We know you care. But once she's up there and she has time to think, she realizes that, first of all, she damn near lost her mind when she thought that Rhys was dying, which obviously she cares quite a bit for him. Also seems really mad at herself still, but she realizes that if the mate thing is true, then she's really not the traitorous piece of trash that she thought she was. The more she thinks about it, the more she realizes that she understands why he didn't tell her. She's not quite ready to see him yet. So she starts to get bored after a couple of days, and she's like looking through the cabinets and she finds a bunch of paints. And she basically paints shit all over this cabin, which personally, if I owned a cabin and I let somebody stay there and I came back and they had just like painted pictures all over the damn thing, I would be like, what the fuck did you do to my cabin? Are you out of your goddamn mind? However, they have magic, and I assumed that they could just clean it off pretty quickly if that's what they wanted to do. So I guess it's not as big a deal. At one point, Moore comes back to check on her, and she sees the paintings, and she spends the night with her, and they talk a little bit. And Feyre at that point seems like she's like kind of mentally on the mend, but she winds up staying there for 5 more days. But in this time, she starts to imagine that she could have a future with these people as a family, with Rhys, that she could be an artist, that she could have all of the things that she always wanted to have within this group of people in the future. And she starts to be pretty okay with the whole situation. So the 5 days pass, and there's a knock on the door. she thinks it's gonna be more, coming to bring her more supplies and food, which I don't really understand why she needs to bring her supplies and food if the house is spelled to take care of you and give you food, but that's neither here nor there. He figured out where she was and flew there, and he's all nervous that she's not gonna let him in, but of course she lets him in because, I mean, hello, look at the face. So she lets him in and he sees the paintings and he's like, wow, you painted us, and he's like kind of touched about it. And then she offers to heat him up some food and he's like, oh, and she's like, what? But apparently within fairy culture, when a mate offers you food, it means that they accept the mating bond. She agrees to heat up the food while he explains the whole story of what went on from beginning to end. So he starts getting into the story. And now let me just say that this is where shit gets really real. Reese goes all the way back to the beginning. He starts by talking about the war and how he actually has hated Amarantha since then. And essentially that part's not really super consequential, so we won't get into the details of it, but he hated her since day one. While he was under the mountain, he started to have like these weird visions where his mind would flash for a second, especially at nighttime, almost as if he was seeing through somebody else's eyes, like in a dream. So he would see like a woman's hands and he would see like a bale of hay, and then they became more clear. So he would see like a woman's hands painting some flowers on a table. And through his descriptions of it, we are led to realize that it was Farah's eyes that he's been seeing through this whole time, until one day they started to become much more clear. And he realized that the vision that he was seeing was from the spring court. So it must have been when Farah had crossed over the wall, and the wall was the thing that was like keeping the visions more fuzzy. We saw that she was at the spring court while they were setting up the big piles of wood for the bonfires for Kalanmai, which is when they did like the mating ritual thing. So if you recall, when she first ran into Reese, there were 3 fairies who were like trying to drag her off and be a bunch of creeps and most likely assault her, and he showed up just in the nick of time to save her. The first thing he said was, "There you are, I've been looking for you." And at the time, we assumed that he was just kind of making it seem like they were together to scare those people off, but actually, he was actually there looking for her. Oh, and I almost forgot an important part. So one time when he got a vision of her painting, he tried to send back an image of the night sky to her, and she painted it. That was the night sky that she painted for herself. So he was under the impression that maybe she was seeing these things too, and like she might know who he was when she showed up. But when he got there, she had no idea who he was and was like totally not scared of him, but like kind of intimidated by him. And he was just like, okay, well, guess not. He said that he found himself incredibly like unbelievably terrified, like to a degree that was almost inexplicable, when she made the deal with Amarantha. And he couldn't really figure out at the time why he cared so much. And then when she was so hurt with the whole Mittengard worm situation, that was when he found his way in with the bargain. It's a good thing that he did, because the reason that she was able to, like, remember she said she felt like there was like a tether to the world when she was dead, like when she was beyond the grave. The tether that she was feeling was actually her bond with Reese, which is why she wound up seeing through his eyes when she was dead. And he kept tugging on his end of that mental bond when she was dead to try to get her to come back. He spent the next several months trying to convince himself that Farah was better off without him, and that if she wanted to marry Tamlin, then that's what he had to let her do. But when he heard her and felt her saying that she wanted to escape at her wedding, he knew that calling in the bargain would be the only way for him to go save her at that point. And it made him look like a huge dick, but really he was just going to help her. And at the end of this whole story he tells, she gives him his food and accepts his mating bond. So now they are a mated pair. And the next chapter, I'm not even kidding you, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that it was like an entire ass chapter of just them banging. At one point, he nuts and causes an avalanche. I'm not kidding. There's a whole spreading paint on them scene like it's freaking Ghost with Patrick Swayze. It is one of the most over-the-top sex scenes I have ever encountered in a book in my entire life, and it is not even kidding you, the entire chapter. And it's a long chapter. But besides all the boning that takes place in this chapter, they do discuss about like whether she can get pregnant, and he says that she can, but like, I don't know, they're planning on not doing that right now, obviously, because they're about to go to war. But they decide that eventually they would like to have kids with one another, which is a nice little sweet moment. And in general, to be honest with you, Rhys's whole speech and his whole story are super sweet leading up to the Bangfest, honestly. It was really, really nice, and it was well written too. So they leave and go back to the Illyrian war camp. All of the friends, the people of Rhys's inner circle, swear a vow to protect Feyre now that they're mated. Rhys and Feyre wind up going back into his mom's house and banging again one last time, and then they take off to the human realm to meet with the human queens again. The queens show up and insult them and are rude and are generally like super difficult to deal with. They show them the Veritas, which is known to be a teller of truth. Mor's family's power is truth, which I don't really understand how that works because Mor tells a lot of lies. They're lies for the greater good, but she still, it's not like she can't lie. So I don't know how this like makes her like the beacon of truth that they think. I don't get that part. Feyre is like saying that she doesn't want Rhys to show them Valaris. She doesn't trust them, and he's like, it's the only way. So they wind up showing them Valaris in the Veritas, and they're like, they don't not believe them, but they don't fully believe them, and they say it could be a parlor trick, which is like a huge insult to Mor and her family. And then they say that they're gonna have to deliberate and leave. And the whole time, Feyre's like, why isn't Rhys pushing harder about this? Like, why isn't he trying to get them? And it turns out that he knew the whole time that the Golden Queen, like the youngest, most beautiful one, had snuck in the Book of Breathings under her skirts and left it under her chair secretly. So back to Valaris they go. Her and Cassian go to see some music show in the city, which totally does not sound like something Cassian would want to do, but it sounds like they have a really good time. So they're leaving this music show. They had a great time, and they sense something wrong, and they feel like this huge force of something coming through the Sidra, which is the river. They look out into the ocean, and there is just like a wall of something that looks like birds, but it's not birds. Oh no, no, my friend. It is flying legions of fairies that are like the Adder. The human queens used the information that they gave them in the Veritas and sold them out to Hybern, and Hybern's army of creatures that look like the Adder are attacking Valaris. Cassian wants Feyre to run back to the house and hide, but she won't do it. So she stays and defends like the rainbow area of Valaris, and she winds up wrecking shop. She raises up the water from the river and turns it into wolves made of water and attacks all of the creatures. And then when they go to take off to fly away to escape her, she turns them into birds, and then she freezes them and they shatter on the floor. Oh, almost forgot to tell you that they took the Golden Queen who gave them the book and impaled her on a spike in front of all of them. So after Feyre attacks all of the troops with her water animals, she sees the Adder and he's gonna get away. Basically beats the crap out of him, and they're falling to their death through the sky. And the last second, she winnows away and lets him crash into the ground and break into a million pieces, and she kills him, and then Rhys comes and finds her. And oh, Amren was on the other side of the river, as she was just like going like this, and like whole legions of the army would just fall down. So they re-secure the city, and when they go home, Rhys is sitting up on the roof and he's looking out over the whole city, and there's like not a lot of lights on because like so many people got demolished in the attack. He's really upset with himself because he feels like it's his fault for giving away their location. She comforts him, he feels a little better, and then they wind up having sex on the roof. So Amren uncodes what's in the book, and it's not great news, to be honest. They can nullify the powers of the cauldron using the book if they have both halves, which they now do, but they need Feyre to read a certain spell aloud while she has one hand on the cauldron, which is really risky because they don't know what happens if you touch the cauldron. Now, Rhys cannot go in with them because his power is being tracked. So if he went in there, they would know they were there right away. So they plan to just go in with Cassian, Azriel, Mor, and Feyre. They get to Hybern's fortress or castle. I guess it sounds more like a fortress to me, to be honest. Cassian and Azriel make pretty short work of the guards, and they get in and get to the cauldron really, really quickly. Now, Amren had told Feyre explicitly not to put the two halves of the book together, whatever she did. But Ms. Feyre Archeron realizes when the book is like in her pockets and talking to her, that it's telling her that what she needs to do is put the two halves of the book together. She takes out the two halves of the book and she slaps them on top of each other, and she is touching the cauldron, and the power of it's like flowing through her, and her nose starts bleeding or whatever. She can't even really get the spell out because she's like not even in her own body and mind. It's like completely taken over her. Then Cassian winds up shaking her awake, and the reason is because somebody walked in the room, and it was Durian, the human that was supposed to be being resurrected by the cauldron that Amarantha had in her eyeball ring. Now, the next few chapters are like super short, and they all kind of run together. I've been through this book 2 or 3 times already now, and I'm still not completely 100% on how this last part went down. But here's the general gist. So Durian has been brought back to life, and he's working with Hybern. Hybern comes out. He's got the whole place spelled like the way Amarantha used to keep their powers at bay. Azriel gets shot in the chest with a bolt of ashwood that is poisoned, and the king can move the poison around his body at will using his magic. So if anybody acts up, he's just gonna straight up kill Azriel in front of them. He also throws like a big burst of power at them, and Cassian shields them all with his wings, and his wings get torn to shreds. Then who else comes out? Freaking Tamlin and Lucian. I know. Tamlin sold them out and agreed to work with Hybern in order to get Feyre back. He said that if Hybern can get Feyre back to him, then he would let Hybern use his lands, which are adjacent to the human lands, in order to invade beyond the wall. But Ianthe sold out Tamlin behind his back to the King of Hybern and gave over Feyre's sisters. So Feyre's sisters are there too, and the human queens are there as well. And their plan is that they're going to take Feyre's sisters and dunk them in the cauldron to prove to the human queens that you can dunk a mortal in the cauldron and they'll come out an immortal instead of being dead. So the queens want to be made immortal as repayment for letting the King of Hybern take over the human land. So they're just pieces of trash. Long story short, Feyre is able to break through some of the spells and wards, and then they wind up dunking her sisters in the cauldron. So Elaine goes in first, and she's screaming, and it's horrible. And when they dump her out, she seems like really lethargic, and she's just like not all there anymore. And they don't really 100% even understand what happened to her, but they know that she's still alive. So then they dunk Nesta in, and Nesta goes in fighting. And Feyre says that she sees in Nesta's eyes that she took more from the cauldron than it wanted to give her. Like, she comes out with like something else. Now at this point, Feyre just wants to get her sisters out of there in one piece. So she makes a plan in her own mind, and she's hoping that Rhys can understand what she's doing. She pretends that she somehow broke her way out of a spell that Rhysand had on her and has suddenly come back to light. And she suddenly is so happy to see Tamlin, and she can't believe that Rhys had her under this spell the whole time. Rhys, being the clever bastard that he is, totally gets what she's going for. Tamlin also makes the King of Hybern break the mating bond between Rhysand and Feyre, which is the worst. I hate that. I don't like it. Feyre goes along with it. And so at this point, I thought that maybe Feyre knew that something else was up. So she lets him break this bond, and then she also, like, at the same time is using whatever is left of the power that she has to speak to Rhys mind to mind, to tell him that she broke the wards and they can get out. They take her sisters and they leave. They winnow out of there, and she's left to just go home with Tamlin. And at this point, we're left like, holy shit, that sucks. Like, that's the worst ending ever. I hate this. But then we get something that we never got before in this series, and that is a Rhysand point of view chapter. So we get this POV chapter from Rhys. They're back at the townhouse. He reveals that he and Feyre had snuck off the night before and had their bond verified by a priestess. So their mating bond couldn't actually be broken by the King of Hybern. He just thought that he could, but he couldn't tell the difference between the mating bond and the bargain that they had between them. But he also had Feyre sworn in as the High Lady of the Night Court, which is very interesting because Mr. Tammy Poo himself was the one who said there's no such thing as a High Lady, so suck on that, Tamlin. Rhys explains that they can still communicate, that he can still feel Feyre being okay on the other end of their mating bond, and now Feyre is with Tamlin in the Spring Court, and she's going to be a spy within the Spring Court to bring it down from the inside out and stop them from plotting with Hybern. The only little snafu in all of this is that Lucian totally is onto her, but he can't really say anything because he needs to get on her good side, because other reveal that I forgot to say during this last few chapters, Lucian saw Elaine come out of the cauldron and all of a sudden realized that she was his mate. So he can't say anything because he needs to stay on Feyre's good side because her sister is his mate. And so now she's in the Spring Court, and that brings us to the end of this story for now, my friends. So that brings us to the end of this book. And like I said earlier, I am not fully certain if we are going to continue with this series right now or if we're going to skip to something else and then come back to this later. I'm going to leave a poll in as many places as I can because I want your input. Do you want to keep continuing with this series, or would you like me to take a break from this series, go into another book or two, and then circle back to this later just to keep things fresh? I just want to know what you guys think because I don't want this to ever become redundant or boring. Please don't forget to leave a like on this video if you don't mind taking a second to do that because it really helps me out in a big fat way. You guys are already giving me a ton of really good feedback from this series, and I know a lot of you are enjoying it, but those silent folks out there who aren't leaving comments saying how much you like it, I would appreciate it if you would leave a like so I know that you want me to continue making these videos. If you are new here, please don't forget to subscribe because I would love to have you around for more videos. We've got some exciting launches coming out this week that I know already that I am getting in advance, and I'm very, very excited to review them for you guys. So stick around for those videos as well. If you want to keep up with me between videos, or if you want to take part in that poll on my Instagram story, please go follow me on Instagram. I'm at Miss Quinface over there. I post all sorts of fun stuff. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of this half of the story. Do you stan Rhysand as hard as I do? I asked you guys last time who your favorite characters were, and we got a lot of Amryn's and a lot of Rhys, which I really agree with. I also really like Mor a lot. I like all of the characters, honestly, for the most part, except for freaking Tamlin. By the way, if you turn on the closed captions, like the auto captions on here, it keeps calling him Hamlin, and I think that's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. That's all for today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me and talking about books and makeup. I appreciate each and every one of you always, and I will see you in the next one.